Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Wisco Whiskey Review with me, Jeff. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Noble Oak Double Oaked Bourbon. Now, this is kind of an interesting one, and I'll tell you why here. This is a non-distilling producer, or an NDP. I think I've talked about that in one of my other videos, but just in case you don't know, or as a refresher, what that means is that they're a company that buys whiskey from a different source. It's usually a pretty big distillery. One of the biggest ones is called MGP in Indiana, and they source to a lot of different people. A lot of them are, kind of younger companies or upstarts, and it's just to kind of get some product out there while their own stuff is usually aging, or sometimes they don't even distill their own stuff and they just source from different places. It could be really well-known distilleries, like Wild Turkey, Four Roses, Heaven Hill, you name it. Could be Tennessee whiskeys too, like Jack Daniels or Dickel or any of those other ones. So it kind of just depends on, the relationship between the two companies of where it comes from. Now in this case, Noble Oak is a non-distilling producer, so they don't distill their own stuff. And if you look on the back of the bottle, this actually says distilled in Indiana, bottled by Noble Oak Spirits Company in Newton, Ohio. So because of that, distilled in Indiana, MGP is so big that if you see that on the back of a bottle, you're pretty well to assume that it's distilled from MGP. It's just that big of a company, and they source to so many different places that it's a good bet it's coming from there. Now that's not 100% true, but in 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the case. So again, I don't know for sure where this comes from. If I had to take a guess, I would say MGP, but don't quote me on that. I don't know that for sure. I tried looking on their website, but it doesn't disclose that information, but at least it does say distilled in Indiana. A lot of people don't mind sourced bourbon as long as the company that's selling it is at least somewhat transparent that they themselves are not distilling it. It's even better when they can say exactly where they got it from and give you like the specs on it and all that kind of stuff. That just really helps, kind of solidify that, what they're giving you, you can check out. But some bottlers don't do that. They're a little bit more shady, they might not even specify. I think they're legally supposed to, but that doesn't always mean that they do. So again, non-distilling producer, this is Noble Oak. Again, they're out of Ohio. So we're gonna check this out. This is their Double Oak Bourbon. It says bourbon whiskey finished with Spanish sherry oak staves. So if you notice, I didn't say straight bourbon whiskey because when I looked it up, the age statement on this is only a year. It says aged at least a year in new charred white oak barrels. And then they finish it with sherry staves. So that's gonna give this probably a little bit fruitier of a finish on it. But in order to be straight bourbon whiskey, it has to be aged at least 2 years. Bourbon, as it is, just regular bourbon, it could be aged, any number. It could be aged a few seconds in new charred American oak. It would still be considered bourbon. It's straight bourbon is where it gets a little bit more technical. It's got to have that 2-year age statement on it, etc., etc. So let's take a look at this. We're going to do just a regular review. We'll look over the nose, the palate, the finish, and the value, and I'll grade those from 0 to 10. That was a pretty squeaky cork here. All right, I'm a left-handed pour this time. That's the first time I've ever done that. All right, the other thing I want to mention is that I think really cool what they do is that some of their proceeds go to help plant trees in deforested areas. I looked it up on their website today. So as of today, 7/25/21, they have helped plant over 203,496 trees. So I think that's really cool. Every bottle they sell goes toward, helping plant trees. They work with an organization for that. And I think that's super cool. No soapbox or anything, but I just think that's a cool thing that they're doing, to try and help the environment, help make the world a better place. I think we need more trees. So kudos to Noble Oak for doing that. I think it's awesome. Some might see that as like a marketing shtick, but they don't really push that in their marketing. It's kind of more just about the whiskey. So I think that's really cool. Soapbox aside, let's take a look at the color here. This looks to be quite a bit more red than your typical bourbons would be. It's not super dark, but it does have that reddish hue to it, which I would assume is going to be from those sherry oak staves. because a lot of your bourbons don't get this red. If anything, they get darker, but they don't have this reddish hue to it. So again, it's only aged a year in new charred oak, but I think that gives it enough color, plus the finishing, you know, to give it a pretty decent color here. You know, you wouldn't expect this to be aged just a year or maybe a little bit more than that. It looks older than that. So let's go for the nose. Okay, so right off the bat here, this is maybe going to be divisive for some people, because some people don't like finished whiskeys, because this one just automatically you get a lot of that like grape and just red fruit kind of just blasted right at you. There's still the vanilla, you know, a little bit of the oak, the caramels, your typical bourbon notes in there, but that fruit is just way up top. It's just like dialed through the roof, you know, compared to your typical bourbons that aren't finished. Yeah, this is just like a red fruit bomb in a glass. And again, you know, it's going to be divisive. Some people love that, some people don't like that as much. So it's going to come down to whether or not you like kind of wine finished bourbons or not. But I really like the nose on this. I think it's great. Again, I tend to gravitate toward kind of sweeter, fruitier bourbons. That's just kind of more in my wheelhouse. So if you like more of kind of the spicy or kind of like, you know, drier, oakier bourbons, this might not be your cup of tea. All right, let's go in for the palate. Cheers, guys. So I know I went over the age a little bit, but I didn't go over the proof. This is going to be 90 proof or 45% ABV. Now that's kind of a, you know, that's a good like entry level, or, you know, kind of a, just a, I don't want to say daily sipper level, you know, where it's nice and easy. It's not going to completely blow your palate away, you know, with the ethanol or anything like that. And that's kind of what this is doing. It's kind of coming off as nice and soft and fruity so far. Yeah, that fruit is just, again, front and center. I think there's enough proof there to really carry forward those flavors. You know, it doesn't feel super watery or super thin, which I like. You know, it's at 80 proof. If you dial it all the way down, I feel like this one, you know, might have had that effect of being a little bit thinner. So I'm glad that the proof isn't just your, you know, bottom of the barrel 80 proof here. And so full disclosure, I'm not like the biggest wine snob. I briefly worked at a winery, but, you know, they were doing kind of some Wisconsin varietals of wine. So I'm not the biggest wine nerd. I don't know all there is to know about wine, especially with sherries. I believe sherry is kind of more of a sweeter wine and not as dry. I could be wrong on that. You might have to correct me. But, you know, this fruit, it's not really coming off as drying. And again, that could be just because it's a finish. But yeah, it's just like an orchard in a glass. There, again, there is that vanilla, the oak and caramel, kind of that sweetness, and a little bit of spice. But again, it's definitely more on the sweeter side of things. That kind of comes in after that fruit kind of hits you right front and center. But yeah, I mean, that's pleasant. If you like sweeter, fruitier bourbons, you know, this is probably going to be up your alley, I would say. All right, so let's rate the nose here. Okay, so again, full disclosure, as with all my videos and all my rankings and stuff like that, all the numbers I give here are all subjective. So, you know, what I think about something could be completely different from what you think about something, and that's okay. But I really like the nose on this one. I'm digging it. There's just all that like red fruit, grapes. There's just a lot of like cherry and apple going on. But I really like the nose. I'm gonna have to give it a 7.5. All right, so now let's grade the palate. Yeah, I mean, the palate's really good too. I think, you know, the nose kind of gives you a sneak peek as to what you're gonna get on the palate. You know, it doesn't deviate from the nose much at all. And again, if you like fruited stuff, this is gonna be your jam. I mean, it tastes like grapes and like a strawberry jam in a glass with the bourbon in there. So it's just hard not to score this high, you know, and I know it's gonna rub some people the wrong way because they just hate finished bourbon. Some people don't even really think it's bourbon. I don't fall into that camp because I think this is really good. Again, as long as, you know, they're disclosing what they're doing to the whiskey or the bourbon, I don't really care, you know. Again, not everyone's the same. Everyone's tastes are gonna be different. So there are some people that hate finished bourbons or finished whiskeys, and that's perfectly fine too. Everyone's got their own thing, and that's, I think, what makes it great. but I'm gonna give the Palate a 7.5 on this one too. Again, the only thing, you know, nitpicky, I guess, is like, I wish there was maybe just a little bit more proof in there. I think there's enough to kind of hold it, you know, to get enough flavors going on with it. It's not really losing a lot, but it'd just be interesting to see like what 100 proof or 105 or something would be like, you know, to see if any more of those kind of bourbon flavors jump out a little bit more. But as it stands, I think this is great. It's really fruity, it's really sweet, it's well balanced, so I'm gonna give it a 7.5. All right, so now we'll get into the finish, which are the flavors that kind of last after you've had it, and whether that's kind of a short, medium, or long finish, whether the flavors linger for a long time, whether they die out right away. So let's give this a try here. So interestingly enough, I think the finish kind of is where the bourbon actually shows up kind of the strongest, right? It's the sherry notes are kind of, again, I keep using the phrase front and center, but they're just right there in your face, right when you drink it, kind of in the mid, and even kind of toward the end too, in like the palate. But you know, after you've drank it, the bourbon notes kind of show up a little bit stronger, kind of in full force after you've already had it. So you get more of the vanilla, you get more of the caramel, not so much wood. Again, this is a younger bourbon, you know, aged only at least a year, so it's on the younger side. You don't get as much of the spice or as much as the kind of oak and wood that you would from an older bourbon, let's say, but you do get that kind of sweeter side of the bourbon on the very tail end of this. It does end pretty quickly though. I'd say this is not even a medium finish, it's probably a short finish, so I wish that had a little bit more kind of, you know, length on that. That's really probably the worst part about this, to be honest, is the finish. It's not bad, but I just kind of wish it lasted a little bit longer. Insert your own joke there. But, you know, so we'll give the finish a 6. It's definitely good. It's just kind of, you know, it disappears pretty quickly. All right, so now we're going to grade the value, and this has an MSRP of about $35. I think it depends on, you know, the region and the distribution and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how easy this is to find in every part of the country. Again, I live in southern Wisconsin, so I can find it pretty easily most of the places I go, you know, where I would find whiskey. So I would imagine their distribution is decent, but you might not be able to find it everywhere you go. So I have to kind of factor that in a little bit to the value too. With it being 35 bucks, I think that's pretty good for something like this. Again, the age could probably be a little bit more up there, you know, only aged a year. That's really young. Even for just bourbon. So I wish it had a little bit more age on it, and that might ding the value a little bit too. You know, some people look at age a lot when they're, you know, buying a bourbon, you know, especially comparing it with the price. So for 35 bucks, I think there are definitely worse things you could buy than this. I don't think it's the best $35 in whiskey. You know, it's, if it was something like 25 or even 20, I think that would be like a steal, but you know, I'd say it's fairly priced for what it is. You know, if you can find it for 30, definitely give it a shot. Even 35 is definitely not bad. So we're gonna put the value kind of at a run-of-the-mill 5, because again, there are some things could be better, could be worse, but it's definitely not bad. If you like fruited whiskey, I think you should try this. All right, so that brings us to our total, which is 6.5, and I think that's, you know, pretty darn good for this. Again, the value is really the only thing kind of bringing it down for me. You know, I think if you're used to paying 35 plus for a whiskey, you wouldn't think twice about spending it on this. I think this definitely drinks like a $35 whiskey or higher. Again, it's just distribution and things like that I'm not sure of. So I would say give this one a shot. I think the flavors and again the nose are really kind of where this stands out. The finish, could be better, but just what you're tasting and what you're smelling are very good. So give Noble Oak a try. I should also mention they have 2 other expressions. There's a Trinity, which I think is kind of a blend of certain things, and they also have a rye that is finished in port casks. So I definitely want to give the rye a try. I've seen that, that really rhymed poorly. I've seen it around, so I'm gonna try and give that a go. That might be, you know, the next thing I get after this is gone, which is very soon. So thanks for watching, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That would really help me out. Let me know if you've had this one before, if you've seen it and kind of been leery about it. Again, if you hate fruited bourbons or really sweet bourbons, you know, maybe don't give this one a try, but if you want to try something new that just isn't straight Kentucky bourbon, this is something that I think would appeal to a lot of bourbon drinkers or even Scotch drinkers that are looking to get into bourbon, because a lot of your Scotches are finished in sherry barrels. It's either ex-bourbon or ex-sherry casks, and you know, sometimes both, but you know, this definitely has kind of that sherry vibe going on for it. So give this a try. Again, hopefully you can find it where you are, but you know, just let me know if you've had it before and what your thoughts were on it. So thanks again, guys. Cheers. Keep on sipping.